before we start, I'd just like to say a quick thank you to Hannah and Silvana for giving us this space, and also to the team for making this such a welcoming, friendly, as well as inspiring conference. So before I start, I just wanted to say a few words about Co-Impact. So Co-Impact is a grant-making organization. We bring together collaborations of funding partners and provide grants to organizations in the Global South, predominantly those that are led by women, and those that are working on creating lasting systemic change in education, health, and economic opportunity, as well as women in leadership. So we envision a world where women have the opportunity to exercise power, agency, voice, and leadership at all levels. So with that, in March last year, we launched a $1 billion fund for gender equality and women in leadership. So we focus especially on women in leadership in law and economics, because we know these two sectors have significant influence on the lives of women through influencing resource allocation, the way that core systems such as health are designed, and through influencing policy making. So just to give you a bit of data, even though the case for women in leadership in these sectors has been made, only 2 out of 10 human rights bodies have at least 50% representation of women. The International Court of Justice has had 5 women judges in its entire history, compared to 106 male judges. Although, I should point out, one cause for celebration. Last week, they elected their 6th woman judge. And only 8% of central bank governors are women. So the reality is that while it's important to focus on individual women leaders, we also need to address the institutional barriers and create an enabling environment for women to enter into, thrive, and rise into leadership positions, especially in these critical professions. So I'd like to turn to Iris from the Gates Foundation. Iris is Deputy Director of Women in Leadership and one of our key supporters. So Iris, how does having more women in leadership roles within law, economics, and health prevent the rollback of women's rights and create a forward movement for gender equality?
Well, thanks, Mitali, and I just want to echo the thanks to the organizers. It's just felt like a wonderful oasis of peace, calm, and sanity in an otherwise chaotic world, and also to the government of Iceland. It really has been powerful to see an example of, and as much as the leaders say it's not perfect, relative to other countries, it really has been wonderful to see this exemplar of what women's leadership could look like. So thank you, everybody, for that. It's been just a wonderful gift to be here and in this community of fierce women leaders and gender champions. So to answer your question, first I want to say gender equality is a basic right. Most international treaties prohibit discrimination. We've also set ourselves as a global community goals, Sustainable Development Goals, and SDG 5.5 recognizes the importance of women's leadership to achieve gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls. So in a nutshell, it is our right. We are half the world, and we demand this. But we also know it's not a reality. So we are not in decision-making positions, and you gave us the statistics. And the world is literally poorer for it. The World Bank estimates $162 trillion in loss in human capital due to gender inequality. So we know, as you said, law, economics, and health are critical disciplines for development, but they're not the only ones. These are the areas that we at the Gates Foundation focus on. First, we know that when women are strongly represented in the legislature and in the courts, then we will have better laws and we will have better accountability of these laws. If they're in decision-making positions in central banks and ministries of finance, then they can make sure that the monetary policies and budget allocations are fair, that they will include social protections, and this includes health. and safeguarding budgets for health. So as an example, the Abuja Declaration, which came out of the African Union, states that countries should allocate a minimum of 15% of their budgets to health. The reality is every year, it's only one or two, if that reaches this minimum threshold to provide for particularly the most vulnerable in the population, and that is women and girls. And if women are leading in significant numbers in the health space, they would be making decisions that would take into consideration the needs, not just of women and girls, but of everybody. And we see this playing out very clearly in the debates and battles around bodily autonomy and also abortion rights. You see this as a confluence of law, of budgets, access to quality and safe services to protect these rights. And then you also see the failure, what happens when you don't have these things coming together to protect the rights of women. So I'll stop there.
Thank you. So we've heard about the need to act and the problems. Now, I'd like to turn to Maria. Maria is Deputy Executive Director of the Centre for Justice and International Law and also leads the GQUAL campaign to overcome the underrepresentation of women in international justice. Before I ask you your questions, I just want to highlight some of the successes of the GQUAL campaign. So GQUAL have successfully campaigned for the appointment of a woman as the UN Rapporteur on Torture for the first time in its 30-year history. Your sustained campaigning on gender parity in UN special procedures elections has led to women now occupying 43 out of 80 positions. And you've successfully campaigned for Argentina to nominate their first woman candidate to the Inter-American Court of Human Rights in a fully transparent, participatory, and competitive process. So I think that deserves a round of applause. So could you share with us what has it taken to achieve these impressive results, and what can everyone in the room, what can we here learn from your experience of this?
Yeah. So thanks, Mitali. It's a pleasure to be here on behalf of GQUAL, and it's a global campaign, as you said, to achieve gender parity in international decision-making with a focus on those bodies that impart justice and develop international law and human rights, where women continue to be severely underrepresented. And since we started the campaign in 2015, we've seen progress, and we're super proud of that. And aside from those examples, we've seen the UN appointing the first special rapporteur on freedom of expression, the first independent expert on health. The Inter-American Court went from 0 women to gender parity, and we've seen an increase of around 20% in the number of women who are running for these positions that we monitor. And definitely there's a number of lessons and takeaways that we have taken note out of that. A couple of those, I think, have to do with things that we have been able to do before those specific campaigns took place. So, for example, learning from the very beginning that it was not going to be enough to just have the data and have the research, that we actually needed to campaign, that we needed to have specific advocacy strategies to position the issue high on the international agenda and to sustain it there. Second, I think it was important to create a strong narrative around why these international bodies are important, not only for women's rights, but also for international politics, international governance, and the issues that we all care about: climate change, migration, development, peace, security, equality. The International Court of Justice, for example, that you were saying, has a history of 116 judges, only 6 of them women, 5 sitting on the bench today in a minority, is currently deciding the first advisory opinion on the climate emergency. And these are positions that are appointed by the government. I should say that. The governments are the ones nominated and then voting for these positions. I also think it was key for us to run our campaign based on data. So we've been monitoring the composition of more than 100 bodies. We alert on the vacancies. We inform about how the selection procedures work. We rank all the governments about like, how are they doing in terms of promoting women to international positions, and we blast this information to an increasingly growing number of network and of diverse women who could become candidates. And this has prompted, a little bit out of shame, I think, the institutions themselves, like the UN, to start putting the information out there. And I think another thing is key is learning also that would not be enough unless we focus on institutional changes and understanding what part of the institution we could take on to change that could make a difference. And for us, it's been the selection procedures, which right now are part of the problem that could be part of the solution if they were to include gender parity as a specific criteria. So this led to Human Rights Council resolutions at the Organization of American States that say that gender parity should be taken into account. So when those specific pictures took place, they didn't happen in a vacuum. We were able to leverage all this previous work to make it happen. And then I think a number of 3 other factors we saw in those pictures that we should take note. One, we did not do it alone. We partnered with civil society, and particularly with civil society close to those issues. For example, in the Special Rapporteurship on Torture, we partnered with organizations that are working on preventing torture, so that to show that this is not only an issue of women's rights, it's also effective for torture prevention. We could have not done it if it weren't because of the right people making the right decisions at the right time, and a lot of them were men, including men who decided not to run for these positions, and including men like the Argentinian ambassador, who was the Human Rights Council president at the time, who made an exception and went for the second candidate of the list, who was a woman, instead of the first one, who was a man. And then lastly, I'd say that I think it's important that these were all firsts. We're talking about the first women to get to these positions, and we've learned that it's easier, not easy, but easier, to get the first woman appointed than the second one, and to achieve gender parity when it has not happened before and you had a little bit of shaming coming to your strategies, than to sustain it. And that's where we are right now. We've gone from 30 to 50 in a lot of spaces, and we're working to be able to sustain parity. And I hope that if I come here next year, I'm still able to share success stories, but that will probably require a lot of people here in the room joining us in changing the picture of international justice.
So that leads on to a really important point. Is the individual empowerment of women enough? How do we solve for this problem at scale? You've obviously achieved amazing successes, but how do we ensure that all women have access and ability to rise to these leadership positions? Iris, perhaps I'll turn to you first.
Yeah, sure, thanks. I think we all know that individual empowerment is not enough, but it's important. And so we and others, including yourselves, need to continue to invest in the capacity building of women, programs that are designed around women's leadership, everything that they need to succeed, which includes mentorship, coaching, peer mentorship. We are investing and partnering with an organization called Women Lift Health in this endeavor, but we know it's not enough. And so we take a 3-prong approach, or 3 pillars, which we consider interrelated. So the second part of the pillar is, we know even if you are the most exceptionally skilled woman, if you're in a hostile environment, it's not going to help you that much. And I think probably some of us in this room have had that experience where we feel like, oh, great, I've got my degrees and I've got my experience, and I walk into this organization, and it's not an enabling environment, and you're not able to thrive. No matter how great you think you are or how great you actually are. So the second pillar of work is around organizational change. And so really trying to understand what is it that makes an organization great for women and just inclusive, I should say, an inclusive environment. Because what's good for women is also good for it should be good for women of color, people with disabilities. Everybody should be able to thrive in the working environment. But we know that's not enough. We can't just have 1 or 2 exemplars. We need to understand what is it that's going to, that makes this organization great, and how can they be upheld as an exemplar within their industry to pull others along. And then the final part, which is a lot of what Maria was speaking about, is around advocacy. and it's difficult. It's complicated. You really have to be sustained, and you really have to work together with others to make those big pushes. And you said it so well, it's not just a one-time thing. You push hard, you get the success, you celebrate, and then if you take your eyes off the ball, guess what? You're back to square one again. Or sometimes, as you said, it's actually, people are like, hey, wait a minute, we've done that. We had the woman, so what more do you want? Or we had the person of color. What are you talking about? Our job is done. So this is why we take a really comprehensive approach to that. And the last thing I'll say is that we do a lot of research to really try to understand, unpack, so that if we figure this out, then we can kind of spread the gospel and get others to understand, like, this is the process, this is the playbook, and have other people not just talk about it, but implement and move forward. And we actually want to achieve our goal, which is to accelerate progress and ultimately get equality.
Thank you. And Maria, same question to you.
No, I fully agree. I think empowering women is the key thing, but it's not going to be enough, because we know that often institutions and cultural norms work against women. We know that they are patriarchal. We know that pipelines are heavily male-dominated, and that women have to go through gender-based violence, structural and intersectional discrimination, and so much more. So we need institutional change, because I think empowering women will not allow us to sustain equal leadership, will not allow us to diversify equal leadership, and it will not allow us to institutionalize gender parity and equality as a quality of the institutions and the leadership that we want to see. I think institutional change requires a number of things that Iris and I were talking about. It requires sustained effort over time, and that requires funding and resources. So I have to say thank you to Co-Impact for really supporting our work. And it requires a broad coalition of actors, from civil society to state actors working together. It requires research and data-based initiatives. And I also think it requires to be strategic, because I don't think we need to dismantle all our institutions and start from scratch. I think it's really about understanding what the entry points are to making institutions and processes work for women.
Thank you. And you've got an incredible audience here today of leaders,
yes,
and some incredible organizations. What is it that you would like to say to them, and what call to action would you like to put out to them?
Well, I think there's so much that this group here could do for the field of international law and law in particular. Just on the one hand, placing focus on how relevant the legal field is, aside from politics, to really promote governance, equality, access to rights, and so much more, and how critical women's equal participation in this field is. I think finding out more about the initiatives that are working to level this field, joining them, supporting, giving visibility to them, and yes, funding them, because it is an underfunded field. I think also, like particular with the issues that we work on international law, I think including these areas as part of the data collecting efforts that are ongoing, for example, understanding for those who are working on the foreign policy areas, what could they do? Do people know how many women and men is their government nominating and voting for? Could there be gender parity guidelines in this? And then I think it's also a matter of check out the GQUAL website, see all the positions that are open, and who could become a candidate. Who knows? Could be the next UN Secretary General of the United Nations, who has never been a woman, be here in this room.
Thank you. And Iris, the last 30 seconds before I will use my privilege to have the last word. So over to you.
No, I would love that. It's long overdue to have a woman in the UN and many of the bodies that you spoke about. But I don't get to vote, but if I had one. But I think, to answer your question, it really depends. I think we've got a range of wonderful, incredible women leaders. And if you're a funder, then your job is to try to get more funding into the space for women's leadership and gender equality. This is what Co-Impact has done so well. The goal is $1 billion. We get excited to hear that you've raised $500 million, but when you think about how big and the scale of the challenge and the headwinds, and we know actually there is funding on the other side. This is not just a one-side fight. So I think if you're a funder, we need to figure out how do we get more funding into this space. If you're an activist, keep pushing and push harder. If you're a legislator or a politician, then figure out how you can strengthen the laws and policies that will protect women and girls, but also enhance opportunities and accelerate the pace at which other leaders are coming into the door. And I think the most important message coming out of this convening is really we have a community here, and we all have to work together. We all have to pull and push super, super hard. For us, feels like we're standing in the same place, sometimes going a little bit backwards. But I think if we come together in a really, really concerted, organized, strategic way, then I think we'll be successful. And this whole gathering has given me tremendous energy and optimism, and I will take that home with me. So I'm just delighted to have had this opportunity to participate, and I hope I'll be invited back next year.
Thank you, Iris. So
Thank
to sum up, it's important and essential to invest in individual women leaders and support individual women leaders. It's also important for the lasting change that we want to see to support and invest in removing the institutional, societal and social barriers to women in leadership. I'd like to just end with saying Co-Impact was born out of the belief that to address the huge problems of today, we can't do this alone. We have to come together in community. We have to come together in collaboration. So I would like to end with an invitation to everyone in this room to join us or invite us to join you in this fight, and to come together as advocates, champions, funding partners, program partners. We would love to continue this conversation, and thank you to you both as well.
Thanks, Mitali.